This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
So now let's get into the early life of our perp today, Robert Lee Parker. Robert Lee Parker, aka Robert White, was born in approximately 1972 in Arkansas. We could not find anything about his early life. What we do know is that in 1991, he was sentenced to 8 years in an Arkansas prison for burglary and theft and served nearly 2 years. And from 1990 to 1993, he was charged with aggravated assault, burglary, theft, auto theft, and aggravated robbery in Arkansas. So now we're going to get into the timeline. Take us there, Beth.
In 1995, Robert Parker had moved to Shoreline, Washington, and was living with his girlfriend, Princess Gray, who was pregnant with their child. Parker made money through selling drugs, selling drugs, and pawning stolen property. He would often go out alone at night for long periods of time without explanation.
This reminds me of many perps that we've covered in the past, that their wives were like, oh, he would just go out at night. The baseline killer comes to mind.
Yeah.
So the couple lived in a duplex being rented by Princess. It was located behind an apartment complex on a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood in Shoreline known as Ballinger Terrace. Ballinger Terrace did not experience many murders. In the previous year, there had been only one.
On February 24th, 1995, just before midnight, the Shoreline Fire Department responded to a report of a fire in a ground floor apartment at the apartment complex on the cul-de-sac. After firefighters put out the fire, they discovered the body of Renee Powell, a 43-year-old single white woman.
2 years earlier, Renee, a registered nurse, had visited Seattle on vacation from her hometown of St. Louis, and she never left. Renee was gay. She had lived as a closeted lesbian for most of her life, but in Shoreline, she finally felt free to be herself.
Which is wonderful. It's just sad that she only got to be herself
Found freedom,
for such a short time.
Yeah, I agree.
I watched a show, I can't remember which one it was, Forensic Files or another one.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking to one of her family members, and they were like, yeah, she was so happy.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
You know what, though? I am glad she got to be free and happy, even if it was just for a moment. Yeah.
Renee's body was found lying face down on the floor of her bedroom with a bookshelf pulled down and lying on top of her. Her left arm was bound with an electrical cord cut from a lamp in her bedroom. She had been gagged with a piece of lingerie, and most of her clothes had been torn off.
She had been stabbed twice, once in the abdomen and once in the back. An ice pick was found near her leg, and a knife was found on a table in the hallway. 2 fires had been set. The first fire was started in the master bedroom near Renee's body, and combustible material had been placed between her legs. The second was started in the living room next to the fireplace.
So when they were talking about these fires on Forensic Files or whatever it was, they were saying that these fires did not communicate with each other, which I thought was a really interesting way of saying that they were set separately.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you hear that, I'm not familiar with the lingo, but that makes total sense in my brain. Yeah.
It appeared as though she had been doing laundry at the time she was attacked. The detectives were able to determine that the killer had stolen items from the apartment, including a raincoat, a dress, a video cassette recorder, several bottles of wine, a duffel bag, and some frozen meat.
Not the frozen meat.
Yep.
What?
He even took the frozen meat.
He went in the fridge. I mean, a violation to say the least. So the medical examiner concluded Renee died before the fires were set and that she had died from strangulation and from loss of blood from the stab wounds. She had also been sexually assaulted. Vaginal swabs taken from her body were sent for DNA testing.
30 days after the murder of Renee Powell, on March 26th, firefighters responded to another fire in a ground floor apartment located 50 feet away and on the same cul-de-sac as Renee Powell's apartment. After they put out the fire, firefighters discovered the body of Barbara Walsh.
I'm an American vigilante. I have a question for you. What would you do if someone you cared about was abducted, taken from you? Would you call me? Would you care about how I got them back? Download American Vigilante now.
This December, Christmas gets creepy with the Empty Coffin Podcast. This is host Greg Hansberry, and we are unwrapping the dark side of the holidays. This month, we revisit the haunting tragedy of a rock legend's final performance.
The band was on. They had just started their opening song. The killer walks across the stage, gun drawn.
We revive the forgotten tradition of telling ghost stories for Christmas.
There's this miserable, sour old man who spends all the time on his own in the graveyard, and the goblins take him.
And we sink our teeth into Nosferatu lore.
This story cropped up that the actor who played Nosferatu was so convincing that he was an actual vampire.
The Empty Coffin Podcast is part of the Evergreen Network. Subscribe on your favorite app and have yourself a scary little Christmas.
2 fires in one cul-de-sac.
Ground floor apartments.
Yeah. Come on. So Barbara was a single 53-year-old white woman who also worked in the healthcare industry as a receptionist at a local hospital. She had been widowed for over 20 years and never remarried. She was described as very generous and willing to help anybody.
At about 10:30 p.m., a neighbor had seen Barbara returning from the laundry room of their apartment complex. She was never seen alive again. Barbara was found face down and clothing had been packed all around her body and between her legs.
As with Renee, her clothes had been torn off and her left wrist had been tied with a lamp cord. She had been gagged with pairs of tights and stabbed 4 times in her abdomen. But in this case, 7 different fires had been set in her apartment.
Wow.
Yeah. One had been set in the clothing packed around her body.
A condom wrapper was found in the bathroom along with 2 used towels on the bathroom counter. The towels were collected as evidence. Much later, a pubic hair was found inside one of the singed towels and was sent for DNA testing.
The medical examiner concluded Barbara Walsh died before the fires were set and that she had died from strangulation and asphyxiation. Vaginal bruising indicated a sexual assault.
The detectives were able to determine that a television, a VCR, a CD player, and stereo speakers were missing from Barbara's apartment. Among other missing items were some wicker baskets, a box of silverware, some Raggedy Ann and Andy figurines, 2 miniature red wire old-fashioned bicycles, and a glass prism.
The similarities between the 2 victims was striking. They were both single women who worked in the healthcare industry, lived in the first 4 apartments, and both had been doing their laundry on the days of their murders.
Both victims had been stabbed, strangled, sexually assaulted, and burglarized. Both had been bound using undergarments and cords cut from electrical devices. And at both crime scenes, the perpetrator had removed the smoke detectors and doorbells before setting multiple fires.
Wow.
I'm not sure why he removed the doorbells.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever had a doorbell go out in your house and trying to fix it?
No.
Like, it's mind-boggling. It's the steps are endless. There's wires. That is so much work.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Just don't kill anybody, Robert Lee Parker.
Yeah, just don't do it.
You could try that. So police came to the obvious conclusion that the perpetrator was the same in both crimes. Way to go, guys. And it was surmised that he had been watching the women. And when they left their doors unlocked to go down to the laundry room, the perp went in, possibly waiting and hiding in their apartments for them to return and then attack them. Horrifying.
Yeah.
So let's get into the investigation and the arrest. What do you got for us, Beth?
The duplex where Parker was living with his girlfriend was located right behind the cul-de-sac where Renee Powell and Barbara Walsh had lived. It was approximately 130 feet from Renee's apartment and 150 feet from Barbara's apartment.
King County detectives went door to door and talked to the residents in the vicinity to gather information about the crimes. One of the doors was answered by Princess Gray, who insisted that she was home alone. But the detective could plainly see a man sitting in a chair inside the home.
When the detective asked to speak with him, Princess still claimed to be alone. Okay, Princess.
Well, I mean, he didn't say, do you mean figuratively or literally? Please explain.
An argument ensued, but then the man went ahead and came to the door. He told police that his name was Robert White. Police questioned him as they had been questioning everyone in the neighborhood. They did think that the exchange was odd because of the whole denying that there was anybody home.
Yeah. He all of a sudden became visible after being invisible. What the
But,
fuck?
I was thinking they're a black couple. And, it could have been explained by, I don't trust the police.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Can we get a round of applause for this lady? Or a hip hop air horn? Oh my God. Who are you? Wow.
Who am I?
You did it. Oh my God. Yes. 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 Beth, I am ashamed to say in this moment that I hadn't thought about that. And you, being the OG of true crime, everlasting knowledge and learning. Oh my God. I just, thank you. Thank you so much. I can't do this without you. You want to just take the rest of the script?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. Well,
so they did think the exchange was odd, but he wasn't a suspect at the time.
Okay. So instead, police were looking at another man who lived nearby and who had been writing poetry about stabbing women and having sex with them as they died. Well, it's
poetry.
Art, right? It's art. It's art. It's art. You are an artist, right?
It's very weird art, but okay.
Yeah,
it's art. Yeah.
I mean, people thought it was weird when Frida Kahlo did paintings about her period and her body being impaled by a bus accident. But it's art, right? So not for everybody necessarily, but it's art, and generally it's harmless. So the police were looking at this guy who was an artist with art they deemed troubling. And this person also seemed obsessed with older women. But when investigators collected a discarded cigarette from this man, the DNA did not match. And I love it when DNA does what it's supposed to do.
Its thing.
Exclude people and identifies people.
Yep.
Way to go, DNA. You did it. You did it. Congratulations, DNA.
Police also asked the public for help, and within a few days, they received over 600 tips. However, none of them led to Robert Parker.
So then, in April 1995, Parker was arrested in Linwood, Washington, for a drug offense, and he served 83 days in jail. Princess moved out of the duplex that June while he was still in jail. And in July of 1995, Parker was extradited to Arkansas on a fugitive warrant.
Yeah, so I think that he had a warrant out for his arrest in Arkansas when he moved to Shoreline.
Mm-hmm.
And he was using that name Robert White to try to get away.
Fly under the radar.
Yeah, fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And then when he was arrested and went to jail, then they figured out who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he was done with jail in Washington, they sent him to Arkansas to serve his time.
Another thing I think we should point out is 1995, DNA was new.
Yes.
And so, I will say that criminals can be very smart and clever people. And maybe it was at one point in time smart and clever to use different names.
Yeah.
But with DNA, it doesn't work.
No.
And that's that.
But I have to say he was kind of smart, I think.
Yeah, I definitely am sensing clever.
Yeah.
But also, I'll get into what my takeaways, but succumb to his, vices. And,
faux show.
Yeah.
So in November of 1995, DNA profiles came back, which confirmed that the perpetrator in the murders of both Renee Powell and Barbara Walsh was one and the same. But the DNA profile had not yet been linked to Parker.
Parker was released from jail in Arkansas in May of 1996, and he eventually returned to the Seattle area. In the meantime, police were looking into another arson case. This one in Tifton, Georgia, where a 40-year-old single woman had been found stabbed, bound, and raped in her burned home.
Prior to her murder, the woman had been doing laundry in a laundry room attached to her home, and a TV was missing. Another man became a suspect in that woman's murder, but he was also eliminated by DNA. And I tried to Google to figure out who this woman was and find the story, what happened. I couldn't find anything definitively, but I think I found it.
Okay.
I just don't know for sure, so I'm not going to tell the story.
That's fair.
I don't know for sure. But I think it was solved and another man was convicted for it using DNA. But
okay, so
like
Robert Lee Parker wasn't pinned to this murder, but it is eerily similar.
Yes, and they thought, for a time, they thought that it was part of the string of murders.
Well, I don't think I'm ever going to fault police for thinking theories.
For investigating.
For investigating
That's their job.
Yeah, it kind of is. Thanks, Fred. So after Parker returned to Seattle, he began living with a new girlfriend, this time Sharon Bell. This pissed off Princess Gray. And in August of 1996, while at an unemployment office, Princess saw Parker and Sharon together, and she attacked them. They had it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't find the details about this attack. I would have loved to know.
Oh man,
what happened.
Can you imagine if smartphones had been around? We would have known so much more.
Yeah, we would have seen all the video.
Yeah. And I just, my mantra is don't air your dirty laundry out. Like, if you're going to fight, do it at home.
Yeah,
don't do it in public.
Don't do it at the unemployment office.
Yeah, exactly.
So Princess was charged and subsequently found guilty of the assault on Parker and Sharon. She also had an additional pending assault charge based on an incident during a court hearing on the first assault charge, in which she hit Parker.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Princess is a little extra.
Princess, she's like a woman after my own heart. Like, we did an episode and you were like, oh, she's an old lady who really liked art or something. But this princess is more my speed. So while the assault charges were pending, Princess told her therapist that Parker was involved in the murders of Renee Powell and Barbara Walsh. She told the therapist that Parker should, quote, quit cheating on her, unquote, or she would disclose that he had killed these women. The therapist reported Princess's statements to the police on October 29th, 1996. They have to do that.
Yeah, she's a mandated reporter.
Right.
Oh, I guess we should say, that means that if you tell the therapist that you're going to hurt somebody or you're
going to hurt somebody, or if you are in danger of harm or somebody else is in danger of harm, mandatory reporters like teachers and therapists and doctors have to report to law enforcement.
Yep.
They don't get a choice.
Yeah.
And that I mean, there's all kinds of issues with that. Yeah.
Police met with Princess Gray in November of 1996 at the King County Jail, where she was serving her sentence for the assault on Parker and Sharon. Princess told the detectives that Parker lived with her at the time of the murders.
She disclosed to police that Robert Parker was the Robert White who had been at her house when Princess had claimed to be alone. She told them that he often used that name as an alias. She also told detectives that after the murders, Parker had sprinkled pepper inside and outside their duplex with the idea that pepper would throw off the scent for any police dogs searching the area. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it works, but it's
I don't know if it works.
Kind of clever. Yeah.
It is. And I feel like I've heard that throughout like slave escape stories is that throwing things out so that the hounds
the dogs
don't fact check me on this,
you.
but I believe I've heard stories of this, and maybe this is where Parker got this idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
She also described property that Parker had brought into her apartment on the nights of the murders and told them that she still had that property.
Oh.
She said he brought home VCRs and televisions, which that didn't interest the police too much since that had been on the news, and you know, one TV is kind of like every other TV.
Yeah,
but
a TV.
Yeah,
show me something exciting.
But the trinkets and knickknacks interested them more because they're more personal.
Certainly. So, because the detectives agreed to arrange for Princess's release and not to prosecute her for possession of stolen property or on the additional assault charge on Parker, Princess agreed to turn over to detectives items Parker had brought into her duplex on the nights of the murders.
The items included a London fog raincoat, a box of silverware, wicker baskets, a glass prism, 2 wire sculptures of bicycles, and Raggedy Ann and Andy figurines. Detectives showed these items to the friends and family of Renee Powell and Barbara Walsh.
The London fog raincoat was identified as Renee's. Her family remembered when she bought it because it was one of the first purchases she made when she moved to the Seattle area. The other items were identified as Barbara's.
And on November 5th, 1996, Parker was arrested as he arrived at Toys R Us in Northgate, where he worked as a stocking assistant.
Got him. Oh, man.
According to detectives, he came across as soft-spoken and he denied any involvement.
So when the scammer uses the hypnotic method of building rapport, then they create dysfunctional, delusional reality.
That's how a scam begins, convincing the mark that it makes perfect sense to hand over their money to a con artist. The Scams and Cons podcast tells you how scams are run. You'll hear how people are convinced to buy fake art, buy machines that print money, or steal your house.
I get a phone call from my wife, and she let me know that they had decided to move all our stuff out. I could no longer do anything about it except go through an eviction.
And you'll hear it from the experts, people who run the cons.
So we go to your bank, you go in and get $6,000 cash, give us each $3,000, we give you this. You go home, and what you find out is cut up newspaper.
It's fun to know how the trick is done, and that's what Scams and Cons is all about. Listen at scamsandcons.com or wherever fine podcasts are found.
So Parker told the detectives that he had lived with Princess Gray from November 94 through April 95, and he recognized the victim's property because he said it had been in Princess Gray's duplex when he first moved in with her. It was already there, officer.
Yeah.
And he denied any involvement with the murders and insisted that he had not brought the items into the home. Scout's honor.
Yeah, Scout's honor. A sample of Parker's blood was taken for DNA testing. That same day when a search warrant was executed, the police recovered from Parker's apartment a large black duffel bag with purple handles. Renee Powell's sister-in-law later identified this bag as one that she gave to Renee for Christmas.
DNA testing and the analysis of Parker's blood sample was finished on November 6, 1996. They matched. Parker was charged with 2 counts of first-degree aggravated murder on November 8th, 1996. I'm sorry, I can't not do this because of DNA. Every time.
After the charges were filed, Princess Gray called Parker's mother, Blanche Parker, and her own mother, Dolores Gray, and recanted the statements that she had made to the detectives. She claimed that she had actually found all of the property near her garbage cans after the second murder, and that she had lied to detectives because she was angry with Parker.
Interesting. I'm guessing that some people listening to this might be like, why would she lie to the police? They're there to help. But she's a Black woman in America. Yeah. And that's not her experience.
Don't trust the police.
Yeah. So now let's get into the trial. So in January of 1997, a fellow inmate named Michael Chadwick claimed that Parker told him that he was in jail because he had committed a couple of homicides. Just a couple, not too many. And according to Chadwick, Parker wanted him to say that they were together around the end of February 1995.
In exchange for Chadwick's agreement to testify on the state's behalf, the prosecutor agreed to make a favorable sentencing recommendation for his pending case. Parker denied having this conversation with Chadwick.
In the next 2 years, over 50 pretrial hearings were held in preparation for this trial. The trial finally commenced on November 30th, 1998, and concluded on February 17th, 1999.
Chadwick testified that Parker asked him for help in providing an alibi, but much of the testimony and evidence presented during the trial centered around DNA evidence and the testimony of Princess Gray, who at first implicated him in the slayings but then recanted.
Prosecutors stressed to the jury the reliability of the DNA evidence, and remember, this was new science at the time.
Yeah.
While the defense team pointed to the unreliability of Gray's statements.
The defense also told jurors that the DNA match was inaccurate, and the hair was discovered more than a year after Barbara Walsh's murder, and roughly 2 weeks after Parker's King County jail cell was searched for contraband. So if the hair don't fit, you must acquit.
You must acquit. That's what my God, Johnny Cochran said. Yes, yeah. Amen. Thank you so much. And the jurors who listened to almost 3 months of testimony deliberated for 4 days before reaching a verdict, finding Parker guilty of 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder.
Parker, who was 27 at the time, sat quietly in the packed courtroom as the court clerk read the verdict. Relatives and friends of Renee Powell and Barbara Walsh hugged each other and wept softly. Outside the courtroom, Parker's mother sobbed, saying repeatedly, quote, oh God, I can't take him home. I can't take him home," unquote.
The jury did not find that the death penalty should be imposed, and Parker was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But it's Washington, right? So it would be unusual for a liberal state to impose a death penalty. Yeah.
Robin Stratton, a niece of Barbara Walsh's, said, quote, celebrating someone getting the death penalty is not what our family is all about. But we're glad he was convicted and that he will spend the rest of his life in prison, unquote.
So now we're going to get into where are they now? So today, Parker is 52 years old and is housed in Stafford Creek Correctional Facility in Washington State. And Princess Gray died in 2011, unfortunately, at the age of 46.
That's sad.
And we're not sure what happened to her child. We just couldn't find anything. So now let's get into what made Parker snap and our thoughts and takeaways. What do you got, Beth?
Well, since I could find nothing about his early life, I have no idea what his childhood was like or what from his childhood may have influenced him.
Right.
But he was obviously very angry for whatever reason.
Okay.
It was surmised by some investigators that he had murdered these women after he had fights with Princess Gray.
Oh.
And that relationship did seem like it was pretty volatile.
Kind of toxic.
Yeah. Some people also suspected that there were other murders in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Or that he did the murder in Georgia. But like I said, there's nothing concrete out there that connects him to any other crimes. But it's interesting and unusual if these were the only murders that he committed, like 2 murders almost exactly the same and then nothing.
Almost, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he was a convict, and so he couldn't really get a regular job because if you disclose you're a convict, so he kind of almost had no choice. No, I
as
shouldn't
far
say
as not the murder, but as far as like selling drugs,
gainfully employed,
selling stolen merchandise and stuff like that.
To get.
I mean, he had a job at Toys R Us, but you can't make money at a job at Toys R Us.
I don't know how you could sustain adequate shelter, food, health care, etc., with a salary on Toys R Us.
Yeah,
but I would love to be wrong, but I don't know how that's possible. But I only bring that up because he sort of was inadvertently put into a position where he couldn't really earn money in an upstanding citizen kind of way. And that led to theft, robbery, and those things escalate sometimes to murder, right?
Right, but I don't think these murders were for theft, for burglary. I think there was more to it than that.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, he could have gone in there and stolen stuff while they were in
then
the
left.
laundry room and then left. Yeah.
You're right.
And just the nature of the crimes. I mean, the women were sexually assaulted and then left in kind of degrading positions.
Right.
Yeah, typical serial killer stuff. So
yeah.
There was something more going on there. And why he chose these women, I'm not sure, but they were single, so he didn't have to worry about looking out for or subduing anyone else.
Yeah.
It is interesting that they were white, but I think that may be because there were mostly white people in the neighborhood. Yeah. Right. Shoreline was majority white. It seems like he was just out there walking around the neighborhood and he saw these women and maybe watched them for a while.
Yeah.
They were older than him, so he may have considered them more vulnerable. Or maybe they were a stand-in for his mother if he had a bad relationship with her.
But we won't know.
No, we don't know. That's all just conjecture.
Yeah. Great points, Beth.
What are your thoughts?
I am kind of hung up on your... he was watching them.
Right.
But we still don't know why. And that's the unanswered question. But maybe you did just answer it when, you're filling in the holes, right? We don't know it for fact, but maybe something happened with his mother when he was a kid. And maybe
his relationship with Princess like kind of triggered something. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how both of the victims were healthcare workers.
Yeah.
But I think that, it has to do with proximity, right? If an employer is in town
nearby,
and an employer being a healthcare provider place, then it makes sense that employees live near there.
Yeah. Like you knew a lot of people whose parents worked at Boeing.
Exactly. Right. Ding, ding, ding. And so I wanted to get into the violation of it all. How he violated these women's spaces and then their bodies and then their lives and then burning it all down, which doesn't really work as far as, getting away with murder or getting rid of all the evidence all the time. But perhaps in the mind of a killer like him, after he did the deed, like these things are compulsions, and sometimes compulsions have like a process. And if you don't finish the process, you're like stuck.
Yeah.
And so the deed, I think for him may have been the murder, and the conclusion or the wrapping it all up was the setting fire to it. And it was in this cul-de-sac, so he had an opportunity to watch it happen, right? Watch it burn away. And I think that maybe he didn't get full satisfaction of the acts that he committed until the fire began. So I don't know. I'm trying to be a pretend OG of true crime.
No, you're doing a good job. Keep it up.
Oh, thanks, friend. Okay. So also, I'm glad, Beth, that you researched this case and gave us some good information about the victims. I looked for them and looked for more articles about them in particular.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find any.
It was hard to find, for sure.
Yeah. Well, if Beth's on it, it's not impossible. So, and lastly, I just want to say, we all know true crime is true for somebody. So our hearts go out to the victims and to the loved ones in the community. Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, Look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Is the pressure of your wedding day being perfect from sunrise to sunset weighing on your mind? Planning a wedding is stressful, but guess what? We are here to help. On the Bridechilla podcast, we celebrate love and help you plan your wedding day. We're all about keeping it real and having fun every step of the way. So whether you're just starting to plan or counting down the days, we're here to help you stay cool, calm, and collected. We have expert tips and amazing guests like wedding dress designer Haley Page. Let's get this party started and embrace your inner Bridechilla. Listen to Bridechilla wherever you get podcasts or visit us at thebridechilla.com.
24 hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months as a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real-life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.